Have you ever felt like the universe is trying to tell you something, but you just can't figure out what it is? Maybe it's the same number showing up over and over, the same kind of person coming back. Weird dreams, intuitions that scream at you, but you quiet them down. Way too many coincidences to just be random. But let me ask you something serious. What if what you're calling a coincidence is actually a code? A code that, if you keep ignoring it, starts breaking everything around you. Relationships, plans, health, energy. Because the universe doesn't send you a WhatsApp message. It speaks in signs, in repetition, in feelings, in what you feel but can't explain. And those who don't get the signs keep making the same mistakes, and they pay a bigger and bigger price for not listening to what's already being said. Now listen, if you clicked on this video, it wasn't by accident. This might be your final warning before everything shifts, because those who learn how to decode this language change everything. But pay attention. The universe doesn't talk to just anyone. It only reveals the code to those who are ready to transform their own reality. And if you keep watching until the end, I'm going to show you how to recognize when the universe is testing you and when it's getting you ready for something way bigger. Because the next sign might already be happening while you're listening to me. Think about your life right now, all the pain that shaped you. The people who came and went, the places you've been, the choices that seemed random, even the mistakes that brought you here. Now imagine if none of that was random. What if every single thing, no matter how disconnected or painful it seemed, was actually part of a bigger, silent plan your soul made before you even took your first breath in this world? It's hard to accept, I know, because we grew up believing we're here by accident, tossed into the chaos of existence, just trying to survive in a mess of randomness. But what if that's the biggest illusion? The idea that nothing has meaning? There's a map, a subtle script your soul has carried from the start. But this map doesn't come on paper. There's no regular compass. It's not obvious, not logical, and definitely not visible to the regular eye. It reveals itself in fragments, and each fragment only shows up when you're ready to see it. Most people never see past the first symbol. Want to know why? Because the ego's first instinct is to try to control everything, understand everything, predict everything. But this path doesn't work like that. The soul's map doesn't unfold all at once. It doesn't show you the ending. It gives you a clue, a feeling, a restlessness, a strange urge to change. And then it waits. It waits for you to act based on that spark, with no guarantees. Just faith. The first symbol is usually way too subtle for someone still living on autopilot. It might show up as a random encounter, a sentence that hits you hard, a sudden urge to drop everything and start over. But since it doesn't make logical sense, most people ignore it. They step over the symbol, walk right past it. Then they end up back in the cycle, thinking it was just another weird thought. The soul's map doesn't shout, it whispers. And here's the most powerful part. The next symbol only shows up when you honor the first. That's the code. You don't get the whole map. You get the next coordinate only after you move toward the one you've got. That's why so few people ever reach the second point of the journey, because the first already demands a leap into the invisible, a step toward what you feel but can't explain. And here's the spiritual paradox. People want clear signs, but they ignore the most obvious ones. They want an open map, but can't handle the silence that comes before the next move. And while they wait for a blinking neon answer, life already answered. Through intuition, synchronicity, discomfort. But since it didn't come in the format they wanted, they tossed it aside. You start to realize that the map isn't about knowing where to go. It's about listening to what you already know, but don't trust yet. And that kind of knowing isn't in your head. It's in your gut. It lives in the spaces between the lines of your life. It shows up when you start to remember who you are. And that's exactly what the first symbol triggers, a crack in the veil of spiritual amnesia. It doesn't give you an exact route, but it sparks a discomfort, a suspicion that something is out of place. And that suspicion, if you follow it, becomes a search. And the search, if it's real, takes you to the second symbol. But this is where almost everyone stops, because between the first and second symbols, there's an invisible crossing, a space of doubt, silence, and internal confrontation. A stretch where nothing seems to make sense, where everything you used to believe starts to fall apart, and you start asking yourself, am I going crazy? Or am I finally waking up? This crossing is the breaking point. Whoever crosses it changes. Whoever gives up goes back to sleep. And the craziest thing is, a lot of times, the second symbol is already there, just on the other side of fear, ready to be revealed. But it only shows itself when you let go of control. What could be hidden in that second symbol? That's the key that separates the awakened from the distracted. And that's exactly where the mystery starts to deepen. And the craziest thing is, a lot of times the second symbol is already there, just on the other side of fear, ready to be revealed. But it only shows itself when you let go of control. What could be hidden in that second symbol? To notice it, you need more than just willpower. You have to be shaken out of autopilot. Life only reveals itself to those who are awake. But what does it actually mean to be awake? It's not wearing white clothes or chanting mantras or memorizing pretty quotes about the universe. Being awake is being present. It's noticing, with brutal clarity, everything happening inside and outside of you. No filters, no distractions, no excuses. Most people live with their bodies here, but their minds somewhere else, in a future that never comes, in a past that won't return, in promises made by routine that were never kept. It's like they're walking in a trance, repeating patterns, following scripts they don't even remember who wrote. Meanwhile, the signs are right there, on the sidelines, trying to be seen, begging for attention. The first step to activating a symbol is breaking that trance. It's taking your attention off autopilot and putting it back on the now. And when that happens, something shifts immediately. It's like changing the channel on a frequency, like tuning into a station that was always there, but you never heard it because the noise was too loud. That shift is subtle. Sometimes it happens in a moment of total silence. Other times, in an emotional shock. A meeting that flips you inside out. A loss that forces you to see. An event that tears your comfort zone apart and makes you actually feel. When the mind has nowhere else to run, the soul takes the wheel. And in that exact moment, the symbol appears. But it's not just any symbol. It's like reality itself saying, now you're ready, now you're seeing. It might come as an animal that crosses your path at just the right moment, a number that repeats, a dream that feels more real than your day, a phrase that stops you in your tracks, an old object that shows up again, a song that plays exactly when you needed it. The form doesn't matter, the impact does. When it's symbolic, you feel it. It's like something inside says, pay attention, this isn't normal. But here's the most unsettling part of all this. When you start to see, something also starts to see you. That's not a metaphor, it's literal. There are intelligences in existence that watch for the exact moment you wake up from collective numbness. They're conscious forces, subtle, invisible, that don't interfere directly, but they observe, they notice the shift. And once you cross that first threshold of awareness, you no longer go unnoticed. And that changes everything, because if before you thought you were alone on this search, now you realize the path is alive. The journey reacts. Every step you take toward the truth triggers a reaction from the other side of the veil. It's like the universe is finally taking you seriously. But not all observation is passive. Some presences just watch, others test, and some challenge. Are you really ready for what comes next? That question, which seems simple, marks the beginning of a whole new phase. Because after you see the symbol, there's no pretending you didn't. And when you start to realize something invisible is watching you, that's when the game changes. Because these presences aren't just there to observe. They're part of a mechanism way bigger than any rational mind could understand. And it's at this point that you begin to notice something else, the coincidences. But not like you used to, with that curious or funny tone. Now they feel different. They happen in ways so specific, so precisely aligned with what you're thinking or feeling, that calling it random becomes impossible. You think about someone you haven't seen in years, and you get a message from them hours later. You feel a strong urge to change your route, and you find out you avoided an accident. A random line in a video gives you exactly the answer you needed for a tough decision. It's not coincidence. It never was. Carl Jung called this synchronicity. But even Jung, with all his brilliance, only scratched the surface of what it really means. Synchronicity is a vibrational code, a direct reflection between who you are inside and what shows up on the outside. And the more aligned you are with your inner truth, the faster and more intensely these synchronicities start to happen. But here's the part no one tells you. These signs have an expiration date. Yup, signs expire. There's a sacred window of time between when the universe shows you something and when you act on it. That gap is where free will lives, and it's also where a lot of people get lost, because the sign shows up, it shines, it screams, it pulses. But if you hesitate too much, if you overthink it, if you try to understand before you act, it fades. Not because the universe gave up on you, but because it's always moving. And the perfect moment requires a response at the exact time. These spiritual warnings work like energetic windows. They open up for brief periods, creating bridges between your regular life and an extraordinary possibility. But if you don't cross that bridge when it shows up, it disappears, and the path that was open closes. A lot of people look back and say, I knew I should have followed that intuition. Others feel years later like they lost something they can't even name. That's the echo of an ignored synchronicity, a map that was shown but not followed, a code given but never cracked. That's why you can't live waiting for a clearer sign. They're never going to come with spotlights. They come with subtlety. They come in the whisper, the goosebumps, the quiet discomfort, the snap of realization. And if you're not awake, you're going to think it's just some silly feeling. You'll call it all in your head. And the universe, with all its love, will move on. But there's something even more unsettling. Because when you don't respond to the signs, it's not just the moment that gets lost. It's the frequency, the connection. The alignment you were beginning to build starts to unravel, and you feel it. Slowly, the world starts to seem duller. The synchronicities disappear. The intuition goes quiet. Life starts to feel random again, without magic, without flow. Like you were kicked out of a secret place, but without even knowing what that place was. And the most painful part? All of it could have been different. If you had listened to that first call, then, in the silence that settles after ignoring so many signs, something strange happens. Even though you're disconnected, even though your vibration is low, you start to notice that the world still responds. Not as often, not as smoothly, but it responds. And now, you start to notice the subtle link between what you feel inside and what happens around you. You think of someone, and that person shows up. You feel an urge to check the time, and it's 11:11. You talk about something specific, and that thing keeps popping up everywhere you look. That's not magic. It's a direct reflection of your vibrational intention echoing in the field of reality. Here's where the first deep realization hits. The universe isn't passive. It's constantly translating your inner states and sending back responses in the language it knows best: vibration, symbols, patterns. And that language doesn't use words. It shows up in the event, in the moment that seems to come out of nowhere but matches perfectly what you were feeling inside. Imagine it like a quantum mirror. You think, you feel, you vibrate, and this mirror starts shaping the field around you to reflect what you are, not what you want, not what you say, Mindshi, but what you genuinely and consistently vibrate. And that's why so many people, even knowing about things like the law of attraction or manifestation, can't seem to get results, because it's not enough to want. It's not enough to repeat affirmations. If what you're vibrating inside is insecurity, fear, lack, then that's what's going to be reflected. Vibration always wins over surface-level intention. So then, when life starts responding, when the signs turn into events, it's natural to get excited, to want to speed things up, to try to force results. And that's where the fatal mistake happens. The mistake of trying to control the invisible with the hands of the ego. This is the point where a lot of seekers get lost. They start trying to manipulate the signs. They demand answers, force synchronicities, interpret everything as confirmation of what they want, not what they need. The connection becomes a game of validating their desires instead of a true dialogue with the sacred. But the universe doesn't respond to demands. It responds to surrender. When you try to control the pace, when you force your will onto the process, you shut the channels down. The field starts to go quiet, not out of punishment, but protection. Because at this stage, if you insist on shaping reality just to please the ego, you lose alignment with the greater purpose. And that misalignment doesn't always show up right away. It creeps in slowly. Things stop flowing. The answers get confusing. The signs start to contradict themselves. You feel like you're back at square one, like you did something wrong. And you did. Not because you were looking for the truth, but because you tried to use it as a tool for control. That mistake can delay your growth for years, because you think you're on the path, but you're stuck in a new kind of illusion. The illusion that you can force the manifestation of something just because you want it. You forget there's an intelligence behind all of this, an intelligence that sees what you still can't. And yes, that intelligence does respond, but it responds to your alignment, to your clarity, to your ability to trust without proof, to keep going without guarantees. That's why a true spiritual seeker doesn't ask, when is it going to happen? They ask, am I at peace with what I'm vibrating right now? Because manifestation isn't the goal, it's the result. The goal is alignment. But what happens when you start to realize that this greater force responds not just to what you feel, but to who you've truly become? And it's when you think you've got it all figured out, when you start interpreting every event as a sign, every coincidence as confirmation, that the biggest danger shows up. The ego starts dressing up as the master. At this point, many fall into the most sophisticated trap on the spiritual path, the trap of enlightened self-deception. It's when the seeker, enchanted by their own progress, starts mistaking personal desires for divine guidance, and anything that feeds their personal wants conveniently becomes a sign. You want to make a decision, and you see a yellow butterfly. You take that as confirmation from the universe. But is it really? Was that really a higher calling? Or was it just your anxious ego looking for any symbol to validate a choice it had already made? This is where the paradox of the yellow butterflies is born. The symbol itself isn't the problem. The problem is the source of the interpretation. When the mind is attached to a result, It can twist any synchronicity to look like spiritual permission. The ego disguises itself as intuition. Desire camouflages itself as a calling. And the illusion becomes even more dangerous because now it's dressed up in light. It's self-deception with an esoteric fragrance. The mind is clever. It watches how the universe responds, learns the mechanics of symbols, and then tries to artificially recreate the same signs. But without real internal alignment, those signs are just echoes of the ego trying to sound mystical. And the most alarming part is that, in this phase, the seeker doesn't even realize they've veered off the path, because they're convinced they're being guided. They believe they're flowing with the universe, but they're just swimming in circles inside a bubble created by their own mind. And how does this happen? Through attachment to comfort, to validation, to the feeling of being connected, even when everything in their life says otherwise. The seeker ignores the silence of intuition, ignores the real discomforts, ignores the body's warnings, all in the name of continuing to believe they're in control of their own evolution. And this is where many people get stuck. For years, trapped in a spirituality of appearances where everything seems magical but nothing actually changes, because there is no transformation without truth, and no truth without dismantling. That's why the ancient alchemists had a foolproof method to tell the difference between a real sign and a trap set by the ego. They didn't look at the shape of the sign. They looked at the effect it caused internally. A real sign from the universe doesn't come to please the ego. It comes to shake you up, to break a comfortable certainty and force an expansion. An authentic symbol, once decoded, causes real movement. It triggers action. It stirs creative discomfort. It gets you out of your place. If the sign puts you in a lazy bubble of certainty, if it makes you comfortable, if it only reinforces what you already wanted to hear, it probably wasn't a sign. It was the ego dressed up as spirituality. And that's hard to accept because it forces you to ask the question almost no one wants to face. What if what I called intuition was just fear trying to protect itself? But there is an ancient key that clearly reveals the difference. A subtle criteria, almost forgotten, that the masters used to know whether they were hearing the soul or the ego in disguise. And that key is about to be revealed. That ancestral key the masters sought had one clear purpose: to separate illusion from revelation. Because it's not enough to decode a symbol. You have to identify where it came from. And there's one criteria that's as old as it is true. A real symbol never points toward comfort, never reinforces fear, never validates stagnation. It always points upward. That's the invisible ruler. The spiritual measure ancient alchemists used to tell the difference between a true soul code and just another mental projection. And even though it seems simple, it demands brutal honesty. Because the symbol that lifts you up isn't always the most pleasant, but it's the one that transforms. A true symbol doesn't come to confirm you, it comes to expand you. It doesn't say you're right, it says you're ready, and that changes everything. There are 3 alchemical tests that can help you recognize whether a symbol that showed up in your life is truly a divine code, or just a repetition of your internal projections. The first test is the test of expansive discomfort. When the symbol is legit, it hits something deep inside you that might feel uncomfortable at first, but at the same time invites you to grow. It doesn't reinforce old habits or patterns. It moves you. It activates something that was asleep. If what you're feeling from this symbol is just comfort or confirmation of what you already thought, be suspicious. A soul code almost always comes with a call to leave your comfort zone. The second test is the test of silent coherence. A true symbol doesn't create euphoria. It doesn't come with shouting. It doesn't need external validation. It brings a kind of certainty that doesn't need to be explained. It's like something inside just knows. It's not excitement, it's alignment. A silence full of meaning. If you feel like you need to convince others of what you saw, or if you're clinging to justifications to defend that sign, maybe it didn't come from the soul. And the third test is the test of upward movement. After encountering that symbol, your energy should rise. Your vision should expand. Your life should shift. It could be a small action, a new attitude, a decision that once felt impossible. A real symbol never leaves you in the same place. It's not spiritual decoration, it's a catalyst. And if nothing changes after the symbol, then it wasn't a symbol. It was just a nice thought. The hardest part of these tests is that they can't be rushed. The ego loves to jump in and say, yes, that's it. But soul symbols are never in a hurry. They plant themselves like seeds, and their truth reveals itself over time as you shift your vibration to embrace what was shown. But accepting a true symbol is accepting a point of no return, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once the soul shows the next step, ignoring that call brings consequences. And they're not external consequences, they're internal. It's the silence of the soul pulling back. It's the connection going cold. It's the field closing until you're ready to see again. That's why, before asking for more signs, ask yourself if you're willing to respond to the next one. Because a true symbol demands a choice, and it's not always an easy one. Because when you accept that symbol, when you say yes to the soul's call, something starts to move. It's not immediately visible, but an ancient gear, maybe asleep for lifetimes, starts to turn. The code is activated. And unlike what many people imagine, this activation doesn't come with lights and fireworks. It comes with silence, with losses, with shifts, with the strange feeling that something was taken before something new is given. The universe tests you, but not as punishment, as purification. It begins to remove everything that no longer matches the frequency you just accessed. People who seemed eternal drift away without explanation. Projects that once meant everything suddenly lose their meaning. You look around and feel like you've crossed into another layer of reality, even though everything still looks the same. And this is where a lot of people get scared. Because the ego, used to being in control, tries to get back what was lost. Why did that person leave? Why did that plan fall apart? But the true initiate understands. It's not about loss. It's about realignment. When a true symbol hits you, it doesn't just reveal, it redraws. And that redrawing doesn't happen from the outside in. It starts in the invisible, in the vibrational field. The code first acts inside the subtle structure of your consciousness. Only then, as a reflection, does the external reality begin to respond. But at this point, there's a detail most people miss. The universe also watches to see if you stay in the vibration you accessed. Because it's not enough to activate the code. You have to maintain the frequency it demands. The true symbol, once understood and accepted, creates a new path. A new pattern of response between you and the field. But that new pattern only holds if you also change. Change in practice, in thought, in behavior, in how you act when no one's watching. And then the universe tests. It tests your commitment to this new vibration. It tests your surrender. It tests your truth. And that test doesn't always come with a name or reason. Sometimes it shows up as an old pattern knocking at your door. Sometimes as a temptation disguised as an opportunity. Sometimes as complete silence. And only those who truly trust can make it through without turning back. This is where many people give up. They go back to old relationships, old emotional habits, old ways of thinking, because the new, even when promising, is still uncertain. But the symbol doesn't go back. Once activated, it becomes part of your internal structure. You might try to ignore it, but you can't shut it off. And that's why, from here on out, nothing stays the same. You're no longer the same person. You don't vibrate the same way. You don't see things the same. And even if you try to fit back into old places, something will always feel off. Because you crossed the veil. You were seen. You touched the code. And when that happens, the entire universe starts to conspire to fulfill what your soul promised before it was born. And then you start to notice something deeper is unfolding. Because suddenly, dreams aren't just dreams anymore. They take on a different texture, a new density. You wake up feeling like something was lived, not just imagined. Places you've never been feel familiar. Strangers talk to you like they've been waiting for you. And the most unsettling part, some dreams start to show up in real life just days later. As if they were previews of something already written in another layer of time. This is the moment the field of the collective unconscious begins to open. Jung said that all of us are connected to a great invisible mind, where symbols, archetypes, and human memories are woven together like threads of an ancient web. But the old alchemists saw even further. To them, this wasn't just a mental phenomenon. It was energetic. They called this moment the entry into the laboratory of the soul, because this is where real transmutation begins. In a visible alchemist lab, lead was subjected to fire, pressure, time, and silence until it revealed gold. But the soul's lab is invisible, internal, intimate. The fire isn't physical, it's emotional. The pressure doesn't come from outside, it pulses from within. Time stops being linear, and the silence becomes a voice. At this stage, your dreams become portals. They don't just speak about you, but through you. You start dreaming about collective symbols, about tragedies that haven't happened yet, about healings that haven't arrived, about messages that don't belong to your personal story, but to something greater, something ancestral, something that speaks about humanity as a whole. And that's when you have to choose again, because entering this laboratory isn't comfortable. It doesn't bring quick answers. It demands radical presence. You start to realize that some of the dreams you're having aren't yours, but are passing through you to reach somewhere else. You become a channel, a messenger, an instrument of something greater that's trying to manifest itself in this reality. That's why you might start waking up tired, even after a good night's sleep, because your soul is working on another layer while your body rests. And no, this isn't about some kind of esoteric glamour. It's about energetic responsibility. Here, every emotion needs to be looked at carefully, every intuition written down, every dream fragment contemplated. Because the soul's lab doesn't produce obvious answers. It dissolves certainties so that something new can emerge from the chaos. And it's precisely in that symbolic chaos that the soul finds raw material to create realities. But be careful. The soul's lab doesn't tolerate rush or distraction. It shuts down when you try to force rational logic onto something that is essentially mysterious. It goes dark when you try to control the process with the ego. That's why many people get this far and then retreat. Because realizing that you're dreaming things that aren't just yours also means accepting that something greater is acting through you. And that's scary. But that fear is exactly what marks the beginning of real inner work. And then everything around you starts to feel loaded with intention. The way someone looks at you on the subway, the song that suddenly plays, the bird that flies across the sky at the exact moment you think about giving up. Every little detail seems synchronized with something invisible, like some hidden intelligence is writing a code, using life itself as the language. You feel like you're inside something, but you don't quite know what. Time starts to behave differently. Some days, everything happens with near mathematical precision, and others, it's like the universe pushes you into total silence, as if it's saying, "Now's not the time to act, now's the time to listen." That's when the mind starts going crazy, trying to figure everything out, trying to turn this living experience into logic. And yet, the more you try to understand, the less you actually do, because this code isn't meant to be read, it's meant to be lived. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They want to find the final message, the big lesson behind the synchronicities, the dreams, the losses, the encounters. They want the perfect quote, the linear meaning, the certainty that they understood everything. But the soul moves at a different pace. And that's where the most unsettling spiritual paradox appears. The answer only shows up when you stop looking. It sounds contradictory, but it's deep. Because seeking is often just a subtle form of control. You want answers because you want security. You want to understand so you can dominate. You want to label things so you can protect yourself. But the universe, like a silent master, starts teaching you through absence. It removes the answer from your view so you can start to notice the path, not the destination. And at that exact moment, something shifts inside you. You begin to inhabit the experience, not as a riddle solver, but as a participant in the great dance of existence. You start to see that the central message isn't in some hidden phrase or secret symbol or specific event. It's in how you walk, in how you respond to what happens, in the silence between one thing and the next. It's in who you become while all of it unfolds. And almost like magic, it's when you stop searching for the message that it reveals itself, not as a logical conclusion, but as a feeling of relief, a peace that doesn't come because everything got explained, but because you no longer need the explanation. You begin to trust. Trust is the final portal, not blind trust, but the kind that's born from a deep inner knowing that something greater is guiding even if you don't understand it. And from that point on, life stops being a mystery to solve and becomes a conversation in motion, a silent exchange, a living code. But not everyone can hold that level of surrender, because here there's no more control. You don't decide when something will happen. You don't force manifestation. You align, and the universe responds. Only the response doesn't always come how you expect. Sometimes it comes as waiting, as silence, as loss, as a fresh start. And that's the space where your true soul begins to reveal itself. Because now, finally, it's no longer looking for answers. It's living the question. And in that state of quiet trust, something new begins to emerge. It doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't arrive as some magical coincidence or a message written in the sky. It's not a repeating number or an animal crossing your path. It's something more subtle, more intimate. It's like a spark lights up inside you, a gentle warmth, a presence that doesn't demand attention. It simply settles in, silently. In that moment, you realize a disorienting truth. The most powerful signs aren't out there. They never were. The true codes of the soul aren't written on signs or revealed in grand dreams. They're born in the silence, in the space between thoughts, in the instant when, finally, you stop asking and start listening, not with your ears, but with your essence. And then comes the shock. Everything you were chasing out there was trying to be born in you all along, but you were too noisy to notice, too busy chasing answers, too distracted by the world, too conditioned to run after something that could only ever find you once you stood still. That moment marks the true beginning of inner alchemy. Not when you intellectually understand, but when something inside you shifts frequency. And how do you know that's happened? You start to feel more present, lighter, less reactive. Not because life got easier, but because suddenly, the things that used to shake you don't hit the same anymore. In that internal silence, life keeps happening. The problems still exist, but you're no longer pulled under by them. You start to see them from a different place, a place where your peace no longer depends on your circumstances. And that's where real strength is born, not from control, but from presence. This is the sign, and it's not visual, it's not audible, it's vibrational. It's like the entire universe decided to whisper inside you, like the answers you've been begging for are finally being delivered, but in a language only your vibrational state can decode. And now, the question changes. It's no longer, what does the universe want to show me? But what in me is ready to remember? Very few make it to this point, because the silence is scary. The absence of visible signs feels like abandonment. But for those who stay, something rare happens. The soul begins to lead, and when it takes the wheel, decisions change, desires change, even time changes. The urgency disappears. The need to prove something dissolves. What's left is a calm that has no logical explanation, only a silent knowing that now, finally, you're where you were meant to be. And it's in this state that the next level begins. But here's a warning. This level doesn't show up with noise or haste. It demands inner vigilance, detachment from old ways of seeking, and a radical courage to sit in silence without demanding immediate return. Because what comes next isn't for everyone anymore. But are you ready to turn your wound into an access point to light? Because this is the moment when the universe stops whispering and starts pressing. And it doesn't press with words. It presses with pain. This is where many give up, because they think pain is punishment, that suffering is failure, but it's not. Pain is a code, one of the oldest, one of the purest, one of the most precise. Pain shows up when you're facing something that needs to be seen and never was, when a part of you is asking for healing, but you're still trying to silence it. When the soul screams, but the ego covers its ears. And the universe? It responds with intensity, not to punish you, but to crack the shell of illusion. That crack is where the process begins. The ancient alchemists called this stage the lead, not just because it's heavy, but because it's dense, raw, dark. Lead represents the rawest part of human existence, the anger left unspoken, the sadness you hide, the fear you pretend not to feel. All of that is lead. All of that is raw material. But no one wants to start there. Everyone wants to jump straight to the gold, the light, the awakening. But there is no true gold without facing the lead. There is no transmutation without confrontation. The alchemist begins where it hurts, because they know that's where the portal is. Have you noticed how the deepest pain often carries lessons no book could ever teach? How grief changes your perception of time? How disappointment reveals your true strength? How a fall shows you what was still fragile inside you? Pain teaches with firmness, but with precision. If you stop fighting it and start listening to it, it changes form. It becomes a map. But pay attention, not just any pain. It's the one that repeats, that follows you, that resurfaces in new faces, in new situations, always with the same tone. It's as if the universe says, until you decode this, I'll repeat it. And it does, not out of cruelty, but out of divine insistence, because there's something you need to remember. And this is the key. The pain you embrace becomes consciousness. But the pain you reject becomes a pattern. It controls you, it blinds you, it sabotages you. And the saddest part? You don't even notice, you only see the results. Broken relationships, cycles that never end, feelings of stagnation. All of that is lead begging to be transmuted. The real spiritual work begins here, when you stop running from pain and decide to go into it. With presence, with listening, with humility, and most of all, with courage. Because that dive isn't easy. It unmasks you, it destabilizes you, but it also frees you. And in that dive, something happens. You start to realize that deep down, the pain was trying to show you the way home. It wasn't punishment, it was the code. And every time you face that code, something dissolves inside you, something old, something that no longer serves. It's the ego surrendering. And when that happens, when you accept the lead with spiritual maturity, it begins to transform. You don't become someone else. You become who you've always been, but without the layers that were hiding your essence. And then, for the first time, you feel, now I get it. Not with your mind, but with your body, with your soul, with the silence that comes after the crying, with the peace that shows up after the chaos, with the light that starts glowing right in the center of your wound. And it's exactly at this point that everything changes, because what was once a search becomes presence. What was once silence now becomes frequency, and you stop chasing signs, because without realizing it, you become one. This isn't spiritual metaphor, this is literal. When your energy gets purified, when you move through the lead and turn pain into light, something changes in your vibrational signature. People start to feel different around you. Some come closer without knowing why. Others pull away without being able to explain. But what's happening is simple. You're activating, you're mirroring, you're exposing what was hidden in others just through your existence. You become a symbol when your own journey starts to stir movement around you, when your choices begin to impact subtle fields even without words, when you walk into a room and the conversation shifts, when you touch someone and they get emotional without knowing why. That's symbolic presence. But here comes a crucial shift. The world also starts to see you differently, not with its eyes, with its field. It's like reality begins to recognize you as a messenger, and at that moment, doors open, but others close. Because someone who becomes a symbol can't keep playing small, can't keep pretending they don't know, can't keep hiding behind old excuses. It's like life is saying, now that you've accessed this, there's no going back, and there really isn't. Because a true symbol carries power, but also responsibility. You're no longer just a seeker, you're a channel, you're a bridge, and what flows through you can either awaken or numb others. Maybe that's why so many true masters speak very little, because they've understood that vibration speaks first, a look communicates before the mouth, and silence, when charged with meaning, says more than any speech ever could. They became living codes, and every place they go is changed. And you know what the biggest challenge is at this stage? Dealing with the loneliness of someone who sees too much, who feels too much, who carries something inside that others can't name yet. Because when you become a sign, you also become a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see themselves. But that's also the greatest gift. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to convince anyone. Because the sign you've become is already doing what it needs to do. And then, what once felt like magic starts to feel natural. You think, and the world moves a piece. You feel, and something around you rearranges. Time adapts to your consciousness. Paths bend to your intention. Reality, like an intelligent mirror, starts to respond not to your words anymore, but to your silent vibration. And the most amazing part? There's no effort. It's like existence itself had been waiting all along for you to step into this place. Here, the symbol isn't something that appears, it's something you emit. Every choice you make starts to carry a frequency that influences everything. Conversations shift, doors open, obstacles dissolve, or intensify, depending on your vibration. Reality obeys you because you've stopped living in the delay of thought and started operating in the real time of pure consciousness. But this is also where the real danger begins. Confusing alignment with control. Because this level can't be sustained with manipulation or ego disguised as spirituality. Reality responds with mathematical precision to your inner state, and if there's noise within, the reflection will be distorted outside. That's why this stage demands constant refinement. A more mature inner silence, a deeper attention to the hidden motives behind your desires. You begin to realize that the miracle isn't about making things happen. It's about letting them happen. It's about making space. It's about not getting in the way of the flow with anxiety, doubt, or rigidity. Because reality doesn't bend to force, it bends to clarity. When you radiate from a clear center, the universe's response never fails. It's also at this stage that answers come even before the questions. You think about something you'd like to understand, and minutes later, a video appears, a book falls off the shelf, a random phrase from someone on the street carries the exact answer. You wish to see someone, and they cross your path effortlessly. This isn't coincidence, it's energetic coherence. Your frequency becomes so aligned with the code of life that everything around you starts functioning like a living organism, guided by an intelligence far more subtle than any mental plan. But there's something almost no one tells you about this phase. The deeper you go into it, the less you can explain it, because words can't hold it. Logic can't reach it. You no longer know how things happened. You just know they did. And deep down, they were always meant to, but there is a point beyond even this, a layer few ever touch. That doesn't manifest in the visible or the measurable. That doesn't translate into results or signs. It's a place where even the codes go silent. There's a point where even silence dissolves, a point where there are no more symbols, no more signs, no more masters, where there's no more you trying to understand, nor the universe trying to teach. Everything that was a search becomes presence. Everything that was a path becomes ground. Everything that was separation, finally, merges. The final door doesn't open with effort or logic or merit. It dissolves when what separated you from it disappears. The idea that you still have to get somewhere. Because what's on the other side was always here, hidden behind your urgency, tucked in the space between one thought and the next, waiting at the center of your being. This last sign doesn't appear like the others. It has no shape, no color, no numerical sequence. It can't be shown in a video or described with words. It's not seen with the eyes, nor interpreted by the mind. It's felt from within, felt like a calling that doesn't shout, but echoes, that doesn't push, but pulses. And when it pulses, you know. You know that something turned, that something sealed, that something inside you recognized the eternity hidden behind the everyday. It's like reality itself stepped aside, and for a second, you saw what the ancients called the light behind the light. At this point, there's nothing left to prove. You don't need the world to understand you. You don't need the signs to repeat. You don't need validation anymore, because you became the code, the verb itself. The living frequency of the wisdom you once searched for outside. That's why this final stage can't be taught. It can only be lived. and it only reveals itself to those who had the courage to cross every veil, including the veil of their own identity. Because here, not even the name you once recognized as yours is enough to describe who you've become. And now, if what you felt along this journey wasn't just curiosity, but a deep memory, an ancient echo within you, then maybe this door is already opening. And if it is, click on the video that's now showing on your screen. The next code has already begun to vibrate, and Thoth is waiting for you on the other side. If you made it this far, don't ignore this. Write in the comments now, "I recognize the signs." This simple phrase is more than a comment. It's a confirmation code, a way of telling the universe, "I'm ready to listen." And before you go, pay attention. There's a special video waiting for you on the screen right now. It's the natural continuation of this journey. Click on it so we can meet there, because the next sign has already started to vibrate, and maybe it's the one that'll unlock what you've been searching for. Oh, and if you felt that this content truly touched you and you want to help this channel keep spreading this message around the world, you can contribute directly through the link below. That makes a huge difference, not just for me, but for all the people who will still receive this calling. I'll see you in the next portal.